Hello, geeks of the internet. I actually made it back this time. I'm coming back at you with the wrap-up slash update about how I did on the Reading Rush 2020. What we're going to do is go in order of the books as I read them. The first book that I read was for the challenge of read a book completely outside. I opted to go for On the Merits of Unnaturalness by Samantha Shannon. This is kind of like a glossary or reading aid for the different forms of clairvoyance in the book series called The Bone Season, also by Samantha Shannon. To give a point of comparison, Cliff Notes version of The Bone Season, it is set place in New Sion, London. It is a dystopian world, future, if you will, where the citizens have become more clairvoyant. So you have telekinesis, mediums, possessions, things of that nature, but it has become illegal. And you follow this main character by the name of Paige Mahoney in the things that are occurring in that universe. And what's interesting about this On the Merits of Unnaturalness is it's a work that is referenced within the book series, and it is actually written by one of the characters. So it was interesting to see this trend that we're seeing now where things that are referenced within the story are being published separately. You have, Tales of Beedle the Bard for Harry Potter. You have The Language of Thorns for some of Leigh Bardugo's books. So it is cool to see that kind of referenced work being released in its own entity. I would prefer to see an actual physical version. I mean, even though I'm more of a hardcover person, it would be cool to see it as a paperback since it is referred to as a pamphlet or leaflet in the books. The next one I read was pretty much rapid succession. It was The Pale Dreamer, also by Samantha Shannon. The Pale Dreamer is for the prompt read a book that starts with the word the. And this one, although it's not necessarily a requirement to read The Bone Season, I would recommend doing so before you start, just because you do get to see the main character, whom, if I remember correctly, in the main series is 19 years of age. She's already been living in this post-dystopian, post-apocalyptic war universe. You get to see her at 16 in The Pale Dreamer. You get to see how she becomes involved in this underground society or gang known as the Seven Seals, how she becomes the Demolisher for Jackson in this world, and her coming into what is her clairvoyance, which is that she is a dream walker. You get to see a little bit more of a naive, innocent version of this main character. She's a little bit more jaded in the main series, and you get to kind of see her origin into this gang, and you get to meet some characters she references that were very significant to her in the past, as well as getting to see the dynamic of what it would require to become a member of this gang versus in the main series she's already a member. The next book I read was actually a graphic novel, also in the e-reader, but I'm going to hold up the first one. It's actually a physical version of this. It's Giant Days. This was for the prompt of read a book that takes place in a different continent than where you reside. This is in Europe. This is following primarily 3 year 1 college students. You're following Susan, who is your grouchy, blue-collar, but pre-med student. You follow Esther, who is this gothic, romantic drama queen. Actually, this is her on the cover of the first volume. And you also follow Daisy, who is homeschooled, sweetheart, naive, flower child. I get the vibe that maybe she's originally from the US. I'm not positive. But essentially it's just general shenanigans of dealing with schoolwork. You're living in a dorm, trying to figure out what rules you can kind of push, passing or failing exams. It's a bit of nostalgia for me, and some days I'd find myself kind of missing college. The volume I specifically read for the challenge was volume 6, and that is actually the beginning of what's considered year 2. They have moved out of the dorms, they're living in their own house, they're dealing with weird neighbors, exes. I'm normally not a contemporary current modern day kind of a reader, except for things like this in graphic novel format. Then I kind of come and go. All right, for the next book, now this I had started reading from the beginning. I didn't actually finish it until Friday night or Saturday of the reading rush, so like day 5 or 6. And that is The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman. This is a reread for me. I last read this as a child, and it was before the 2007 movie release with, Daniel Craig, Nicole Kidman. Aesthetically good movie. It didn't do the justice it deserved for this book series. Let it refresh my memory and as to where does the story end in book 1. You're following Lyra Belacqua in this alternate universe version of Oxford, England, and she lives in Jordan College. In this world, your soul lives outside your body in the form of a daemon. Everyone seems to pronounce it differently. I always read it as daemon, but I see people calling it demon. I don't know. But it takes an animal form, and as you grow older, it will settle into a specific animal that's kind of like a representation of yourself as a person. So they're actually their own character. So Lyra's daemon's Pantalaimon or Pan. And we have another character who is her uncle named Lord Asriel. He shows up one night to Jordan College. He presents some unique findings and gets funding and proceeds to go way back north, leaving Lyra behind. While this is all happening, there are children going missing. And the only common thread people have is this organization called the Gobblers, or they're referred to as the Gobblers. And one of Lyra's friends is taken. So it then proceeds to follow her going to London, meeting up with these different groups of people to try and both find Roger and bring him home, as well as bring an item called an alethiometer, which is essentially the golden compass item that essentially tells you the truth. There currently is, like I mentioned before, the movie from 2007, but we also have the TV show on HBO that just premiered, His Dark Materials, which is the name of the actual trilogy, is His Dark Materials. And I watched it without rereading it. From there, I did enjoy it. There were some differences, but for the most part, I was okay with the changes. I'm going to pose this question to you guys. Let me know down below what you think. I could potentially rewatch season 1 and do a comparison and kind of discuss what things are very much like the book, what things changed, what changes were completely not in the story, which ones are more so for a later book series. I could attempt to do that episode by episode, or I could just do the season as a whole, rewatch it, since I just read the book. We're getting a new show in the fall, hopefully November. So if I were to do episode by episode, that could almost be a refresher leading up to the premiere of season 2 and maybe a reread of The Subtle Knife. Again, let me know down below if that's something you guys would be interested in, but going back to the reading rush, the last few books I read all on Sunday, the last day. And the next book I read was for the prompt, read a book in a genre I want to read more of. So this is Whiskey, Words, and a Shovel by R.H. Sin. I did not realize at the time of picking it up that it actually is a Black author, which is awesome. And I also, just based on the name, couldn't initially register as I was reading it if it was a man or woman who wrote this. I'm gonna preface this with, I don't study poetry. It's something I've trying to get into. And this primarily deals with relationships, breakup, heartache, finding new love, learning to trust. And there were some poems that I identified with and I enjoyed. And I mean, I feel like anyone has had a not so glorious relationship at some point in their lives, or an instant in a relationship that was less than desirable. And it seems to go from this one relationship, things go sour, he didn't feel valued, to him finding this new love interest, and she is, from what I can gather, kind of like a damaged soul, had a bad relationship previously, so it's kind of wooing her. And I was on board with that, but a lot of poems written in the form of you, like, you need to know your worth, you need to not trust so blindly, you need to have value in yourself, which in theory it is a good message, but it almost felt like he was trying to tell me how to feel about relationships. I would have preferred it remaining in the he, her, him, she realm. That way I can still identify with some poems, but I'm still interested in reading more from this author. Beautiful pieces. There were some that were a little off the mark or a little too weird for my taste, but it is definitely much more a relationship-focused kind of poetry collection. The next book was the one that people weren't sure about, or I should say I wasn't sure about, and that was the movie prompt. I decided to be ambitious and actually go for the light novel of The Boy and the Beast by Mamoru Hosoda. And I watched this movie, it had to be at least 3, maybe 4 years ago. And I vaguely remembered the basic premise. Upon rereading, we're following this little boy named Ren, whose mother has just passed away. And I'm going to assume it's the mother's side of the family, not the father's, but he has like this uncle and aunt that show up saying that he's going to be the new head of the house and he's going to go live with them. He doesn't want to be with them. He runs away and is wandering around Shibuya by himself, and he stumbles upon the demon world, and he develops this kind of found family with Kumatetsu, and he becomes an apprentice on this, fighting arts. And from there on, I'll let you guys read the story. What was confusing for me reading it, I don't know this is the light novel format, I don't know this is the author style, if it's a lost in translation kind of piece. I found myself losing track of who was speaking, because it would start off with these two characters telling the story about Kumatetsu. Then you're reading from Ren's perspective, then you're reading from Kumatetsu's perspective, then you're reading from Ren, who is now Kyuta. Like, it just keeps changing, and there was also some weird reaction moments. If you've read graphic novels, manga, or even if you watch some animes where instead of dialogue, it'll just be a bunch of ellipses, exclamation points, question marks. That would happen as dialogue in this, which I didn't love, but I don't know if that's common with light novels, because I will see that a lot in manga, or if that was just a weird words didn't translate well, so they just put an exclamation points in. It was a quick read. For a readathon, I would say it's a couple of hours max, but I don't think I would necessarily find myself rereading this. The last book I read for the reading rush, yes, we hit 7 books, is Tomb Raider Saga of the Medusa, Saga of the Medusa Mask, my apologies. And this was for the first book you touch. This was picked by a couple friends of mine. I didn't realize this going in. This is actually released in 2000, so it was really fun to read a foreword that's talking about that there's a movie featuring Angelina Jolie in the works, and the Angelina Jolie films were my introduction originally to the Tomb Raider universe. So this is actually following more OG game Tomb Raider, like PlayStation 1 era. This was my first time reading anything on the old version, and there were some cringe moments because it is the 2000s. Lara may have said like 5 times in one speech bubble, which hurt me a little bit, but beyond that, it is following much more the I'm a rich woman who just is a bounty hunter, treasure hunter, collector, type of character. It's not so much the coming of age story as with the Modern Reborn series. And she's commissioned to find this mask known as the Medusa mask. And as she's trying to find this mask for her employer, she's also being hunted and people are trying to get it, trying to kill her in the meantime. So it was a very quick read, very fast paced. I am curious to see if I can find the rest of this series, since it is from 2000. I'm not 100% sure if I can find a bind up or if it's just going to be a read some scans online. But I enjoyed it immensely. It was a quick read. It was fun. It was short. But it was a great time. So with all that said, like I mentioned, I was successful. I actually got to read 7 books in a week. That came out to a total of 1,252 pages. I would say it's respectable for my first attempt at tracking and actually reporting online. I don't know if reporting is the right word for what I'm doing here, but letting you know how I did, that kind of a thing. Let me know down below if you guys like the idea of doing a comparison of The Golden Compass / His Dark Materials Season 1. Until then, come say hi in the comments.